Hello everyone and welcome to the Silva podcast with your host Michelle De Silva. A podcast that focuses on creating healing and awareness. In this episode, Michelle interviews Jordan Clements, a private chef and recovery support champion, about his experience with addiction. Stay tuned and listen to Jordan bravely open up and share his wonderful insight.
Welcome everybody to the Silva podcast with me as your host Michelle De Silva. In today's episode, we will be discussing everything to do with addiction. Joining me today is Jordan Clements. He is a private chef and a recovery support champion who's been referred as the British Bourdain. You know, addiction is something of a sensitive issue for those who have gone through it. So I just wanted to thank Jordan for coming on today and to share his story. And being brave enough and having the courage to come in on today. So thank you, Jordan, and welcome.
Welcome, not at all. Thank you for having me. It's actually it's very humbling to get invited to stuff like this, to speak about addiction when people think it's hard. It's very taboo and so on. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to kind of get my story out there, and in the hope that it helps somebody.
That is great to hear. And you just made a point there by saying, you know, it's a very taboo subject, because I'm sure with addiction, ordinarily there's lots of emotions that come that you experience, like shame and guilt and embarrassment. And I'm sure those are some of the emotions that some of us feel going through such an experience. Would you mind telling us a little bit about your story and what led you onto this path?
Yeah, not at all. Essentially, I think it's important to address the fact that we all have addictions. You know, that some may seem healthy to others or less healthy to others. Whether that's, you know, exercise or you know, kind of supplement living or dietary requirements. A lot of us have addictive patterns in our behaviors. I guess I've always been a very driven, addictive person. I had a rather turbulent childhood, so to speak, that led me to a place where I always felt I needed to be in control. So my addiction didn't actually start with drugs or drink. It actually started with work. I had to leave school at a very young age, the age of 13. I was living abroad and needed to pay the rent because my dad was drinking heavily after my mum and dad had split up. And I found myself throwing myself into my work so that I didn't have to go home, because I would get a kicking at home. And I thought, you know, taking a beating versus having sore feet and a broken back from a shift bent over a sink learning how to wash dishes was where I'd rather be. So my pathway to addiction very much came from being addicted to anything that would distract me from the inevitable end of my day, which would be, you know, upset with parents, it would be fighting, it would be beatings, it would be, you know, made to be verbally abused and so on. And I just, yeah, that led me through addiction. And then from work, it went from work to, I became a parent. And every parent out there knows the challenges. And, you know, I threw myself into parenting, and it was, I needed to be the best dad I could possibly be. I owned several businesses at that point. And those businesses were very much, again, my distraction from maybe the strain and the fact that I thought I was failing sometimes as a father. And, you know, I'm very self-critical, and I threw myself into my work, and then I'd throw myself back into being a parent when I got home, and so on and so on. And from that process, when I separated with the kid's mum, I separated with my ex-wife, I found myself in a position of, what do I do with myself now? Like, it was, although it was a choice that I made, it wasn't, I regretted the choice. I actually regretted a lot of my behaviors during the relationship. My point there where I realized that I then had the addictive personality, again, still no drugs or drink at this point, was that I'd realized a lot of my sexual behavior was addictive. I was then throwing myself, because of the arguments that were being caused at home with my then wife, I was turning to other companions to fill a void of what I felt was, again, something that would distract me from what happened when I got home. I was in control of that situation. I would very much feel, good for 10 minutes. And then I'd go home and lie to, my family, which leads to the shame part. And you essentially compress all that shame, and you just put more shame and more fear on top of being caught, of what people will think of you if they know. And then you lie more, and then you hate yourself for lying. And then basically, I started dating somebody a lot younger than me, and there was an opportunity to dabble in cocaine. And very, very quickly, I went from a half gram to a gram of an evening, or a line here or there out at the weekend, to sitting in my house taking £600 or £700 every few days and just buying cocaine and taking as much as I could, and finding myself again in a spirally addictive behavior of sex and drugs. And then it was using, sex fueled parties that were drug fueled, and there was a lot of exploration. There was, a lot of things that I now look back on and realize that why I did them was due to my childhood. So yeah, that's kind of the, in a nutshell, version of my path through addiction and all of the addictions that I've had. But they're obviously open to interpretation, and I have done a lot of work to be able to identify those behaviors and why I've done them, so that I can prevent them moving forward.
Thank you so much for being so open there. I probably would imagine that it's taken you to this point to go through a lot of self-reflection to be able to sit there and be so open and raw. So I appreciate your honesty there and being so raw and open. So thank you for that. What you said throughout that, when you described your addiction, you often referred to, you believed that you were in control every step of the way. And the question I suppose I have is that anybody who finds themselves on this path, perhaps there is a stage that you go through where you're in denial,
Yep.
thinking that you're always in control when maybe in fact you're not.
Yeah, I think the opportunity and what we justify to ourselves is, as addicts, and myself as an addict, not generalizing the addicts in general, because we all have our own journey and our own path through recovery, and even back into addiction and back into recovery through relapse. But it's very much a stage of, when you understand the other side of the addiction phase and you've come through recovery and you are in recovery and you're actively recovering, you can look at things and say, I am in control, because whether I make that call or I send that text, that's down to me. But then what we do is we allow ourselves to justify the process. So there's a justification psychologically that I found, myself and several of the people who I'm kind of supporting through their recovery at the moment, is that it's really, really all about basically trying to hide from things that you don't want to face and justifying the reason as to why you do it. Whereas if you think about it and you are in control, it's about saying, I'm in control of that situation, but the control is actually the situation controlling you, because it's giving you the reason to not face it. And then you have an option, and it's, do you take the drugs or don't you? And if you do take the drugs, you don't have to face it. But if you do take the drugs and you choose that, that's your choice. That's your, then you justify to yourself and say, well, I was in control of that, so I know what I'll do. I'll just have a little one every now and again. And then, it doesn't work.
And you also, what was interesting in your story is that you didn't ordinarily, go into drugs as such. You began with working a lot or throwing yourself into being a parent. And that was often because you were trying to run away from, you said earlier, that you had discovered later on with your earlier childhood experiences. At what stage did you actually connect the two together? Or had you always known at the back of your mind that you were running away?
I've always been really self-critical. Everybody that knows me, again, the likeness that you referred to at the beginning of the British Bourdain, that's been something that a few of my friends have referred to me as, because I'm very much like the way that I speak and talk, and a project that I'm working on is very much Bourdain-like. I would love to be as good as of a chef as he was, but it's when it comes down to it, I've always been aware that I knew when I was making the choice to, be unfaithful in a relationship, that I was doing that, and I knew why. I didn't like myself for it, and I try to say now that foresight is better than hindsight. So I try to think processes through and choices before they actually occur, because, at the end of the day, I don't want to give myself another reason to trigger or, excuse a behavior where I find myself saying, I know what, I'll go out this weekend and I'll take some, I deserve a little one. So I have always been aware of it, but the process I became massively aware of was when I hit rock bottom. And that's happened several times. And as anybody who struggles with any type of addiction, whether it's gambling or drink or drugs or gym or food, it's rock bottom. When you hit one rock bottom, you think that's as low as you can go, and it really isn't. For me, my first rock bottom was being with this young woman who I fell in love with, or I believed I'd fallen in love with. Again, I was using it as a distraction. And, I pushed myself into that relationship and gave everything to it, and very quickly used the excuse of, I need to keep up with the young ones, this, that, and the other, I'm going to do this. And I excused it. And when her and I separated, it was actually a very, very turbulent time for her, and quite rightfully and thankfully for her as a person and her family and me, we separated, and not through choice, to be fair, it was through my behaviour. It essentially made me realise, at that point I thought, I'm at rock bottom. I've got no partner. I didn't like being single. I didn't like being alone. I always needed to be with somebody, but then found myself again adapting the behaviours of unfaithfulness, drug taking, being drunk, so on. And I hit my first rock bottom when her and I separated. Prior to that, there were probably lots of times when we had no money, where I would do everything I could to beg, borrow, or steal money so that we could then buy cocaine, have some kind of drug-fueled orgy, because, again, that was our distraction. And instead of, when I look at it now, I can look back and say, I actually should have helped her with her issues that were causing her to be so supportive of my addiction, and, for us to be doing the things that we were doing sexually, and with drugs and with drink. There was obviously a reason for that. And, did I truly love that person enough, or did I just love the escapism more? So that was my first rock bottom. And then I sat in the flat and I continued to take cocaine, and I realized that I was taking it on my own. I wasn't going out. I wasn't in a party environment, and I would just sit and take cocaine and jump onto, various dating apps and websites and things. And there would be a lot of discussions and parties again. And you lose yourself for 3 or 4 days, and then you sleep for a day, and then you wake up and it all sets in. When her and I had separated, I found myself on the drugs path alone, which was terrifying. I was hallucinating. I wasn't eating. I'd lost tons of weight. I mean, probably at least 2 stone. I did not look like myself. I wasn't acting like myself. I still found the time and the ability, strangely enough, when it came to time to have the kids. I would sleep the day before the kids came over. The house would be completely cleaned, and I would have the kids for the weekend. And due to the support of a very good friend of mine who owned a shop near where I lived, he would basically give me a box of groceries and say, I'll write it on a receipt and put it in the till. but that's for you and the kids for the weekend. And in a way, I'm grateful that he did that, massively so, and he's a very good friend of mine to this day. But I then started realizing or thinking and believing that what everybody had told me in my childhood, when I was sexually abused as a child and told I was no good, I was only used for that. I was only good for being a punch bag to my dad. I was only good as an emotional support animal for my mum. And when I say emotional support animal, that's what she called me, an animal. I had cigarettes put out on me as a child and told I was no use to anybody and nobody had ever loved me growing up and so on. And that's hard to hear as a child. I would obviously, put out there, but as an adult, it's even harder to understand as a parent why another parent would do that to their child. So I essentially just decided that enough was enough, and I contacted my ex-wife. I told her to speak to the children for me, asked her to pass the message on. She had no idea about the addiction at that point. No idea. I was hiding it very well. And the only people that knew about it were the girl that I had been dating and her mum, and some of our friends that obviously we partied with on the regular. I look back at some of the messages now and I see people have messaged her saying, could you please just check in on him? He's not doing well. He's a nice guy. There's a lot going for him if he just pulls his head out of this bubble. And instead of seeing that as, oh, they care, I saw it as, well, how dare you? You were, snorting cocaine with me 2 days ago. And I was more. So I went home and I put out a massive line of cocaine and I took the entire thing in a oneer. And woke up several weeks later in hospital. It was not a pleasant experience. I was terrified. I didn't know what I was going home to. And when I did go home, it was just chaos. My house was trashed. My friends were non-existent. I had no money. I had no car. I'd sold my car to buy drugs, and I just didn't know anything that I'd been doing during that period. I'm fully aware of it. And I know during that period that what I was doing. But when I look back at that person now, I want to shake him and scream and say, don't do this. Do you know what I mean? But if I didn't do it, and if I hadn't gotten to where I've gotten to now, I don't believe I'd be able to help the people that I'm helping now. And that to me has been the greatest gift of coming through recovery is the people that I'm actually working with now who message me and say, if it wasn't for you, my kids wouldn't have a dad. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be walking my little boy to school this morning and my husband would have left me. And I've got, several people who've just reached out. I'm not a professional by any means, but I'm aware of the journey. I'm very aware of how to self-reflect. And I'm a good listener, I suppose. So I'm grateful for that opportunity.
And that's so wonderful to hear. Credit to you that after experiencing such trauma, and no child should have to go through that, and then having to find yourself as an adult and still processing those emotions. But what you said, which was really interesting, and what I find, and correct me if I'm wrong in this, is that before you actually develop the addiction, I almost feel like there is like a lonely element to it. And then when you actually go into the addiction, you still feel alone because you're hiding it from a lot of people. So in fact, you are going against helping yourself because you still feel alone in the addiction. Would you say that's right?
Yeah, actually, really glad you've put it across that way. Strangely, I was speaking to somebody just prior to this podcast, and it was a friend of mine who I've known her for 15 years. We've had businesses together. We've been very good friends, and we're those types of friends who lose each other for a few years and then get back in touch. Now, she's recently said, do you remember when we first met? You said to me, have you ever been in a room with 100 people and felt completely alone? She said, and I looked at you and I said, no, I don't know what you mean, babes. And I went, that's how I feel standing here. And we were in a private members club. It was like a cocktail club in Malta. And I just said, yeah, I could. And she was like, but everybody, like, you're the life and soul of the party.
Mm.
And again, I'm very aware of the inner me that drives the outer me. At the risk of sounding like, I'm maybe developing a split personality, I am very much aware that as I'm maturing, which probably should happen a lot sooner than it has, there is an inner driver that drives the outer me. And I am now very content with my own company. I am very happy to, live on the Scottish Islands and live in a remote area where I'm not faced with the dilemma of having to be in a room full of people and feel alone.
And also what I find quite intriguing is what you were speaking about earlier when you mentioned that you would often see it as like, oh, I'll just do the one, I'll offer myself, a treat. And I think that's where probably the misunderstanding or this misinterpretation that we've got with regards to addiction is that we view in these substances as a treat.
Yeah.
When in fact they're not a treat.
Yeah, they're not.
And they are actually more of a doing something to escape because I can't actually deal with my emotions right now, or I can't deal with what I'm going through.
Yeah, absolutely. It's you having said that, it kind of encapsulates it and simplifies it, because it can be, for instance, the treat for me was that I had gone to a place where, due to the sexual trauma I suffered as a child, which was between the age of 5 and 7, my mum liked to party, and in order to party, I needed to be babysat. So the answer to that was to leave me with 2 gentlemen who were family friends, who were a couple, and it very innocently started off with, share a bath and share this. We've all got to share this, and it moved very quickly into, essentially sexual abuse, rape, for want of a better word, which is a horrible word. I hate it, but it is what it is. Pushing forward, and I look at my life when I was taking the cocaine gave me almost an alter ego, where I found myself exploring a bisexual side of myself and opening up to cross-dressing, all sorts of things where, I'm a big guy. I'm 6'3". I'm very masculine. And all of a sudden I was trying to compete with the memory of what I knew my mum was. Which, while my dad was away, my mum was very promiscuous, and would often take me to places where I would sit on a living room floor while she went to the bedroom with uncle, whoever this guy was. And that actually, and until much later in life when I had the chance to reflect, is to look back on that and go, hang on, that's why I did that. And I'm very aware of that. So it may seem like a treat, and that's, again, as we would use as justification, I'm just going to treat myself. For me, it became a treat and then a punishment. And for me, and for the majority of people who I have spoken to and speak with on the regular, who, again, I'm kind of on this journey with, we all seem to have this really self-critical thing of, we feel like we need punished. We know that taking the drugs is punishing us, and we know that we're fearful of the people around us knowing how far and how low we have sunk. But maybe that's because that's what they expect of us. Why should we not deliver? If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So it's almost like there is like a self-sabotage in that very process of addiction also.
Yeah, I would say that anybody who doesn't think that their addiction is part of some form of self-sabotage, it needs to maybe take a moment to self-reflect and look on themselves and think, there is something somewhere in my life that I am doing this for. There is a reason. And we're all chemically driven. It's the end of the day, your body is a balance of chemicals, and some of us are addicted to the feel-good hormones, and some of us are addicted to the sleepy hormones, and so on and so on. There's lots and lots of balances to it. It's just finding the right balance for you. And unfortunately, the substances and substance abuse and alcohol abuse and so on lead us to places that what I feel the issue is we can self-sabotage all we like, but it's the hurting the other people that are closest to us that, to me, is when we open the conversation and you said about the shameful aspect of it and is there a taboo and so on. A lot of people, the first thing anybody who's struggling with addiction, who's wanting to recover, that I would advise, or possibly not even advise, but just suggest even, would be, don't go into recovery with the thought process of, I need to do this because everybody's going to hate me otherwise, or I've let my mum and dad down, or I'm letting people down. You're letting yourself down. And if you don't do it for you, if you don't do it for yourself, you'll never do it. And I can hand on heart say that there are several people who haven't continued during a recovery journey, who still are very much in touch, but who will message me and say, I'm thinking about this now, and I know I need to do it because last weekend my mum almost threw me out and I'm letting her down. Not good enough. You're letting yourself down more so than anything. And I look at it from that perspective because, other than my children, it's me. There wasn't anybody for me to have to rely on or say, oh, I'm letting that person down. I was letting everybody down. But at the end of the day, the biggest person I let down, when you're sitting in hospital with no visitors and you're completely alone, it's you that you've let down.
It's interesting that you've said that, because I think ultimately what's led up to that point anyway is this inability to perhaps accept yourself and build your self-worth. Because I would imagine through addiction, if you get really, really rock bottom, there is probably an element of just giving up and not caring anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that there are many. I'm not, professionally qualified to make any type of statement about what I would say a reason for somebody being an addict is. But what I am very, very aware of is the patterns in language and behaviors that people show. And in doing that, I just feel that there's just a lot of stigma that we then call stigma, and it isn't. It's not a stigma. It's the self-sabotage part is there. Having a reason for being an addict is there. But there's got to be a reason to recover. There has to be. Because if there isn't, you get to a point where rock bottom is, I can't do this anymore. I'm not strong enough. And the patterns and those behaviors are the people who don't adapt the I need to change for myself first. Those are the people who, I've lost, in the last 5 years, I've lost 7 friends to overdoses, to suicide. One of whom tragically recently I lost was due to the fact that he was trying to recover, but his body had given up so badly that he cut himself at work, developed sepsis, and died within 4 days. But it was that he'd let himself get so low, so bad, his body, he was constantly drinking. When he ran out of drink, he'd bit back on the drugs. The drugs would then fuel him back onto the drink. Then he'd work, but he was working crazy hours and so on. And, he just had no immune system. His body was gubbed. To say that he cut himself at work and then obviously didn't look after it, didn't clean it or clean the wound. He wasn't showering. He wasn't looking after himself. Sepsis set in, and within 4 days, the guy was dead. Tragic. But the patterns of the language and the behaviors from, unfortunately, looking at things statistically, I can unfortunately categorize each group of people I know and say, this person has a really high chance of making it. This person really could, but doesn't want to. So they then fall into the next category of, unfortunately, I then need to take a step back from that person because it's hard losing people.
I suppose that's why, when you have family members around somebody who is going through addiction, is that you often hear people say you can't help somebody unless they are willing to help themselves.
And that's exactly it. Anybody who is struggling with addiction has to want to change. They have to want to change for themselves.
Yeah. You probably have to come to a point where you're like, no, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, this is not me. What am I doing to myself? Like, I'm better than this, I suppose because we live in a world and a society where we often are measured about with how we look, how much we earn, what have we got, there is an element of having to prove ourselves all the time. And that in itself, I believe lately is creating more and more pressure on human beings to be able to get to a certain point and live out this roles that we have to adapt. And if we don't have a nice house, or if we don't have a nice car, if we're not successful, we're not this, we just don't feel like we're worthy of anything.
Yeah. And self-worth is paramount to recovery. The referring back to what you said prior to this kind of segment was you mentioned that it's almost like a self-sabotage, and the self-sabotage comes from having a very low self-worth. When I think about it, did I pay attention to the fact that I was popular when I'd grown up or growing up? No, because all my childhood I was told I would never be popular. I was told I would only be used for one thing. Again, the sexuality side of me looks back at my childhood and says, I wanted to be in control of my own sexuality because it was taken from me. That level of control was taken at a very young age when I didn't know what sexual control was. So now I'm going to experiment doing this, and this, and this person wants to sleep with me. But because they want to sleep with me, I'll decide whether I want to or not, because I've got that choice. And the more people I choose to sleep with, it's that I'm in control of that situation then. So I'm now no longer the one being, objectified and so on. I can actually own my sexuality. And I just look at that and I think, because of the way that, like you say, social media is driving things now, the addiction, drinking, sexuality, I read a recent study that said about the amount of children who are teens, between the age of 13 and 16, who in a recent study had apparently been watching pornography and believed that pornography sex was sex. And you look at how the pornography industry is driven, it's a very, rough and tumble situation. It's not finding somebody that you love and sleeping with them. It's hardcore. And that's a driver to somebody whose hormones are developing, and it's planting a seed in their mind of that's what sex should be. It's you could spend all day for months and months and years probably looking at the psychoanalysis of that and what that's causing in our society. The level of guys that think it's acceptable to do this in the back of a taxi with a girl on the way home that they've just met because of fake taxi or something. There's so many things that drive us as a society that we feel we have to do, or we are just, maybe we don't feel we have to, we just do them because it's kind of what we're told to do.
No,
And
1,000,000%. I totally understand that. I suppose, Jordan, the thing that I want to ask you, if there was anybody out there listening who is a family member and has recognized that somebody that they love is perhaps going through an addiction that they have maybe discovered, or somebody's keeping it from them, what would you advise family members?
Out of all of the things that you've asked me, that's the one that makes me emotional. Whew.
Sorry.
No, not at all. I would say,
Okay, before you answer that, can I ask you why is that gotten you emotional, if you don't mind sharing?
no, absolutely. Excuse me 1 second.
No, take all the time. I'll take a sip of water.
I don't want to put any more fluid in my body now because these are starting to go. So I'm just gonna. The reason that hits home is for a number of things. Is, I didn't have. My dad had died pre-lockdown. He, fortunately for me, although I don't idolize him anymore due to things I found out about him after, I idolized the guy, and if he'd have known how low I'd gotten, I would have hated for him to see that. Tina, my mother, just has been non-existent for 10 years. And so when I think about, when you asked that question, I kind of thought, what would I wish that, what did my family tell me, And it was like, hold on, I didn't have any other than the kids. And obviously the kids were sheltered from it. So, but then I also think about the kids and think, I've been given this second opportunity, well, maybe fifth, sixth or seventh opportunity, in the sense of, the close calls that I've had through my addiction phase of, overdosing and things like that. And then deliberately attempting to take my own life. And here I am, and I'm thinking, it makes it making me emotional because they've got that opportunity now to have potentially the wisdom and guidance that I've gained through my tumultuous addiction, to be able to say to the kids, listen, don't do this or that. And that's, can't believe out of everything you've asked, that's the one that gets me. But yeah, sorry about that. It's just, my family have been my addicted friends. And when I look at that now and I know how I'm helping people, all I could say is, going back to your question, if you're a family member and you have noticed the signs of addiction, or you are heavily attempting to assist somebody through addiction, I would advise a mediation approach. Have somebody who can mediate with you as part of that process. I'm not talking psychiatrists or any type of therapy initially. I'm talking you as the primary caregiver or family member who loves that person. Love works in a number of ways, mysteriously, and one of the ways is for it to potentially cause friction between you and that person. And that person who is going through addiction is trust me, the people that reach out to me are self-critical. They are self-aware. They do know what they're doing. They do know that they're hurting you. They know, mum, dad, brother, sister, auntie, uncle, they know they are hurting you. And they hate it. They do. They don't want to hurt you. They don't want, but at the end of the day, for whatever reason, and it may or may not be your fault, they have a self-worth that is not allowing them to pull themselves through the addiction phase into recovery. And that's in my experience. I mean, I'm not speaking for everybody, but I would suggest there are actually a number of resources in local councils, which I only found out when I came out of the hospital. LADS, which is the Lanarkshire Addiction Service for Scotland, NADS, which is the North Lanarkshire Addiction Service, and so on. There's lots of different addiction services that the council offer that you could be referred to through your GP that will assist you and support you. I don't believe in just chucking somebody into rehab. That everybody that I've spoken to said, my mum and dad have found out that I'm taking drugs, they put me into rehab. They've gone back 4 or 5 times before it's even taken a minuscule effect. And I am not in any way diminishing rehab. I believe in the process. It does help. It does work. But I believe that taking somebody to rehab and letting them know that they're in a supported, correct frame of mind before they head into that building, because it is a very, very lonely place. again.
So it's
And
almost like extending the loneliness that they already feel.
exactly. And the back to what you were saying about the loneliness there, it does tie in. They will be there and they will be triggered. And, it's an isolation method. Rehab is about isolating you from triggers. It's about keeping you away from temptation, from risk, from potential. So yeah, in a nutshell, to speak to family members out there, support, but firm support. You need to draw boundaries for yourselves also as family members. You can't go into it thinking that you know what's best and that you can offer this person help and get them out, no matter how much you know them or love them, no matter how close or distant a relative they are in this pattern for a reason. And your closeness may stop you having the ability to see that. Or you may know very well. You may just say, yeah, well, they're in a terrible accident years ago, or they suffered a serious trauma, or X, Y, and Z. Whatever that reason may be, in my humble opinion and my experience through the people that I work with and help, taking a step back is often the best approach, and allowing people who are aware of what triggers are, how these people should be spoke to, how we as addicts have a journey to travel, and how it is your own journey. A lot of people think, I love my son, he's going to rehab and he'll just do that. He needs to want to go to rehab first. And you putting him in there just makes him feel even more worthless because he's failed, because you're having to do it for him. The assisted support and discussion of, I know that you may be struggling at the moment and there are things that you don't really want to speak to me about. I know that there may be choices that you're making right now that you think I would be ashamed of you of, or that maybe others would judge you for. However, you are loved. You are very much part of this family, and everything and anything we can do to help you through that process, we will do. However, I need you to want to do it for you. So right now, I'm going to leave that bit of information with you. A lot of people just think that I found my son taking cocaine or smoking marijuana, I need to act right now.
Yeah. It's like there's almost an element of, feeling that they need to take control because they don't know how to handle the situation, and they think the best way to handle the situation is taking an action by doing that.
Yeah. Urgency, in my opinion, again, and experience. And it is, I would like to consider that whilst I've not been a lifetime addict, it was a 2.5 year period for me. But again, whereas with the gym, when I was training in the gym, I had to take steroids, I had to do bodybuilding training, I had to do it to the best of my abilities. When it came to taking cocaine, it was go hard or go home. I was not your average cocaine addict who takes maybe a gram or two every single day, or here or there, or uses it just to get by. I was just doing it because I just wanted to be lost continually. And the more and more and more that I took, I was actually told, I was turned down by a drug dealer. I was using a particular line. I dialed, hit send, and I think they'd been to the house maybe 7 or 8 times in a week, and it was not small amounts. I was buying, between 3 and 5 gram at a time of prop, as they call it, or I don't know what else they call it anywhere else, but prop. It was good stuff, and I was taking too much of it, and I was on day 5 of no sleep on this occasion, maybe day 6, probably day 5. But I remember going downstairs, and I tried to get into the car, the Jeep that the guy had, and as I opened the door, my foot just completely slipped off the door plate, and I decked it. And I dropped the money everywhere. I had all this cash, and I picked my cash up. I got into the car, shut the door. And the guy handed it to me, and he said, "No more." And I said, "What do you mean, no more?" I went, "Mate, you're a drug dealer. What do you mean?" And he went, No, listen, my friend." He said, "Listen." He said, "I've known you now for almost a year. When we first met, your clothes were nice. Your hair was fine. You were in a better place. He said, have you looked in a mirror recently? And I was like, I was out my tits. I didn't really care. I was like, mate, of course I've looked in a mirror. What are you talking about? I was like, just give me the stuff. I was like, you're telling me if I dial in and I ask you to come back for more, you won't. And it was. Do you know what? This guy, he said, listen to me, my brother. He said, I don't want this for you. He said, you know, he said a couple of other things about where I'd come from and what I was doing. You know, when I met him, I was filming for stuff for social media, for chefing, and I was doing a lot of promo stuff. I'd done some really high-end private gigs. And I'd literally gone from there to there. And that didn't even stop me. I just got another number. You know, it was so when I look back at it then I think, wow, that was really profound. But at the time, it was not profound at all. It was just more of an annoyance.
And I suppose what you saying earlier in terms of with the family support is that you're already feeling like you are worthless. You already know that you're disappointing people. You already know that you're probably a deadbeat. So to have your family then come and be, I suppose, harsh on the matter doesn't help.
Yeah, I think I don't by any means, I'm not enabling in any way. I'm not saying, oh, treat them with kid gloves. I'm saying look after yourself by taking a step back and allowing a mediator, somebody else like myself who's been through the process, to maybe help. The first thing that most parents want to do when they go, oh my God, I found drugs in my kid's room or in my friend's room or this, that, the other, is confront the person. But when that happens, have you considered what that does to you? If you're the person who has found the drugs and you're the person who's confronting the person that you love, what's your plan? What is your plan? How are you going to now support this person? You're going to spend the next hour shouting, telling them how wrong it is, telling them how wrong they are, telling them how bad it is. They already know this. It's common fucking sense. We all know it. But what's your plan for you? Because if you're going to help this person, you need to know what you're dealing with first. You can't help them just by shouting at them, you know? And it's this is where I've adopted the foresight as opposed to hindsight approach with most aspects of my life now. I used to rush into everything, and now I'm very much what's my plan for this? And that's important. So if you are a family member or a friend or a relative or a stranger who just cares, don't chastise somebody before you know what the situation is for you and how you're going to help that person, because it's understandable you're upset. Yes, we've let you down. Yes, we've hurt you. Yes, but like I've said, we're aware of it. We are very much aware of that.
But because often we would make it about ordinarily also, because then as a family member or a friend, then you make it about like, oh, why what I haven't done and why I wasn't always there for them, and you know, this is because of me. So there's an element of that also coming in from that person, which then often clouds their action to be able to help them in the correct way.
100%. You know, you can't. Addiction is not something that requires anger at all. It's understandable that people are angry due to the actions. And do you know what? I suppose in its rhetoric, that as a statement isn't entirely correct, because, you know, addicts' behavior affects people. As I've said, you know, anger is a natural emotion surrounding addiction due to, you know, you imagine somebody who drinks, gets into a car, drives, and seriously injures or kills somebody, if not an entire family, because they've been drink driving. Of course, it's anger is the right way to, you know, to feel. You're not going to feel anything else. But when we're talking about stripping it back down to you being the person next to that person, if you don't want them to be the person who gets in that car, drunk or high or picks up the toothbrush to continually make themselves sick because they've become bulimic, or we've got somebody who's anorexic and they feel like they've got to keep going with that weight loss journey because that's their addiction, or maybe they're taking steroids and they're taking too many of them. Opinionated chastisement is not an approach when it comes to addiction in any form. And an informed approach is paramount. And I can tell you now that 99% of people that I am helping, I have taken an informed approach with them, as opposed to a judgmental chastisement approach, because it doesn't work.
Yeah, because I think often, people forget is that nobody wakes up one day or as a young 5-year-old running around goes, oh, do you know what? When I grow up, I want to be an addict. Nobody in their right mind actually says that. So I think we often forget when we do form these judgments of people who are going through this really difficult thing, we automatically think of, how could they do this? How could they get themselves in this situation? But they themselves don't want to be in that situation. It's just something that they've gotten themselves into, but nobody wants to be a drug addict. Nobody wants to have a really bad addiction, because going through that process is horrible.
It is. And again, the process is very slight initially, and it happens, and before you know it, you're an addict. Somebody who says, "Oh, I'm not, a drug addict, or I don't do this, but I have a joint every night before I go to bed because it helps me sleep." That then moves into the justification territory for continuing a behavior that is a constant within your life. If it's a constant that you can stop, so if you ask that person, so could you sleep tonight without that joint? And they say no. I'm really sorry to have to. You do indeed have an addiction. You have allowed that chemical to become part of your daily routine. Same thing goes for people who drink every single day. I have one glass of wine every day. It's a ritual, but I'm not an addict. I don't have a drink problem. Cool. Stop the drink and tell me whether the migraines start straight away or is it day 3? Tell me at what point do you start getting restless? Tell me when you realize just how thirsty you are and that you're urinating a lot. But there's so many things that you can look at that as, I can't live without going for a 5-mile run every morning. Well, is that because it makes you feel good? Yes. Well, then you're addicted to that. The word addict and addiction has been stigmatized so fucking much by people going, it's drugs and drink.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's not. People go, oh, I've got a healthy addiction. No such thing. No such thing. There is no such thing as a healthy addiction. Oh, it's a healthy addiction because I go to the gym every single day. Right. Buddhist monks, however, would say that keeping your sedentary heart rate at, below 27 beats a minute or something where they're meditating gives them an extra 40 years of life. So you running every day and doing 5 miles a day, you're actually knocking 10 years off your life. There's so many arguments. But at the end of the day, if you have to do something daily, you would go, oh, that's a habit, not an addiction. Bullshit. Now you're just allowing it. You're justifying it because you don't want. And this is the thing. People are so quick to judge somebody because they go, oh, you took drugs. You're going to be a drug addict. Right? Okay. Well, you take a bottle of wine every single day and you smoke 40 fags a day. You're addicted to nicotine. You're an addict. No, I'm not. It's a habit. No, it's not. And again, commercialism has processed us this way to go, smoking is a bad habit. No, smoking's an addiction. It's a chemical that alters the chemical balances of your body. It causes an imbalance. Forget the other health repercussions. It causes a chemical imbalance within your body that you then you become reliant on. You have to have that chemical in your body. If that's the case, taking cocaine or marijuana or LSD on the regular or DMT or, heroin. It's just altering the chemical balance of your body. But because you do it regular, you're an addict. What is putting cocaine or alcohol into your body, which is another chemical?
So I would say it's really important for people to self-reflect and look at their behaviors, look at their patterns, look at this, maybe this way that they have to do something, and actually go, what am I trying to run away from, or what am I trying to fill?
Yeah. I think when we look at the addiction phase I know several people who take cocaine daily, but they do it to get by. So they bump. They'll take a little bump here and there. They see themselves as the same category as people who smoke, strangely. So I think it is very much about being self-aware, self-reflecting, and realizing that there is a reason for this behavior. And a lot of people go, because I work a lot. Bullshit. You don't
Why are you
choose
working
to
a
stop.
lot? Is it because you're a people pleaser? Is it because you're overextending yourself? Is it because you have to prove yourself because you didn't have that acceptance when you were young? It always links back to something.
Always. 110% it does. Very shamelessly, I'm gonna put this out there also, is that I'm working on a project right now that when it comes to being a parent or a supporter of somebody who's going through addiction, I believe, as I've said throughout this, that information is key to helping anybody. Being informed and approaching that and understanding the trauma journey on both sides. I am fully aware of the trauma that I have caused other people due to my addictions. The sexual addiction caused massive emotional trauma to my ex-wife because she felt unworthy, because why would I have this perfect family, our own businesses and a lovely house and a lovely life, and yet still felt the need to seek sexual gratification elsewhere. We had a very good sex life, a very adventurous sex life, but I went elsewhere. Why? What was wrong with her? There was nothing wrong with her. It was me. But I then caused something in her that she's then going to be, in another relationship at a later part of her life where that's then going to turn into, and I have seen it with people, we've both discussed this, is she now has a very high bar for dating and has said, hold on, is it me now? Because I've dated a few guys and I've always drawn the line and said, no, you're not meeting my standard. And I said, no, it's not you. You've developed that standard due to what I caused, and it's totally acceptable, but it affects her social behaviors. If she's dating somebody and they forget to text message her back because they're out drinking one night, she ends the relationship there. Which you would expect to have a little bit of leeway, or, at least be able to go, sorry, I didn't message you last night, my phone died. But because of what I put her through, it's now affecting her future choices for finding herself a life partner. So, be very self-aware and very reflective of your choices.
That's very mature of you to recognize that, and recognize that your input has contributed to the effects of somebody else.
And I could tell you 100 people that, my behaviors have affected. When I separated from the young girl who I was dating after I'd separated from my wife, the trauma that I caused, her family, essentially, her mum used to ask me to call her Mama Bear. I was very much part of that family, and I had all the support that I needed from her. And I felt very loved, which was alien to me at that point. Funnily enough, I didn't see being married as feeling loved, because I would justify silly things like, oh, you didn't let me do this on Saturday, or I didn't have a say-so in this part of the wedding, or I didn't do this, or I didn't do that, so that's why I'm going to be a prick. But I just didn't have the emotional maturity then to sit and have the foresight conversation with my, I wish to God, and again, this is maybe a bit of an advice segment, but is, if you're thinking of cheating on your partner, say those words. Say those words. Because if you do it, you're going to lose your relationship anyway. And if you're already thinking of doing it, you're more than likely going to. And if you do, you're going to lose your relationship. So what is the worst here that could happen? Do you care enough about that relationship to say to them, I'm really sorry. I'm thinking of this at the minute and I don't know why. Can we discuss it? This is where we struggle as addicts as well, is every single person I speak to finds that they get over the hump when they speak to the relative or the person they love and so on and say, I'm very aware of what I'm doing. I'm really sorry and I am going to try and be better. I am going to try and change. I do want to change this. And that's when they break the hump of it, because it's the loved one then goes, oh my God, thank you so much. Like, I've thought something was going on, or how dare you, blah, blah, blah. It's a hard discussion to have. Telling anybody anything that you feel is shameful is hard. But your choice is talk it out and fix it, or just compact it with more shame, more bad behaviors, more toxicity, and just essentially just keep piling more pressure on yourself and the people around you. And you'll find yourself pretty soon completely fucking alone. And it's where you want to be. Of course it is. It's where we are used to being as addicts. And what leads us to that path is we're used to being alone. We're used to letting people down. We are expecting you to expect us to fail. Therefore, we will fail.
Just carry on.
Yeah. So I'm working on a project just down the show, which is a book called Drugs, Drink, and the Kitchen Fucking Sink. And it's not a book about me as such, although it is about my journey. It's written in the sense of me saying, this was my childhood. This is what I did in my life. This is how I got addicted. These are my addictions. And I kind of go through, it's more of a story self-help. It's about, there are parts in the book that are about self-help and reflecting. And it's been very much kind of looked at the moment, and the people that have luckily supported me through the project so far have said, I didn't actually quite realize that. When you read that, I didn't quite realize that the nicotine thing, or having a drink, or running 5 miles a day, or having to take, a certain diet that I've thrown myself into and I've done this way could be seen as an addictive behavior. But yeah, you're right. And when you read something, it's much different to when somebody tells you it. So I believe, hopefully, touch wood, that may reach out. And from the people so far, we chose a panel of 100 people to read the first 2 chapters, and they have very much been incredibly supportive, which I'm massively thankful for. But again, it's also led to a couple of people being referred to me saying, would you speak to this person for me? I care about them very much, but we just butt heads all the time, and I'm not able to get them out of this rut that they're in. And, successfully, I've been quite successful in taking that approach. Hence why I feel.
So where? Yeah,
Well,
sorry, go on.
I just
No,
feel
just
that,
so where would people find you, Jordan, if they wanted to reach out to you?
on my social media currently, I have at Discover Chef Jordan on Instagram and at Private Chef Scotland. They are the 2 quickest ways to get a hold of me. You will be kept informed on those channels as to what's going to be happening this season. I am launching a project called the Mise en Place of the Mind, which as a chef, we
I like that.
very much care about mise en place. Everything has to be in order. A place for everything and everything in its place. And I'm going to be doing daily, we're looking at between 90 and 180 seconds, or between 90 seconds to 2 minutes of daily listening, which is checking in and me referring what I've learned to adapt the chef world. Raw, rare, medium well. Are you prepared for your service today? What is your dish of the day? You're your dish of the day. Have you got the ingredients that you need to be the best dish today that you can be? And it's very supportive of the mental health journey that everybody in the hospitality industry is going through. But it's also adaptable when you see how I take food and adapt it to mental health. it's very much you could pretty much do it with anything.
Oh, it sounds very exciting. I can't wait to have a look at that. I think just before we end today, I think from me, I just want to say to those who are out there who are going through something difficult is knowing and just remembering is that you have a responsibility for yourself, and you have to get to a point where you got to say, hey, look, like, Michelle, this is not what you want with your life anymore. And I know things are tough, and I know things, people don't understand you, but just look back at yourself as that young child. You want to be there for your child. You want to support that child that you once were. You would never want to give up on a child. So just think about not giving up on yourselves, and always remember that we all have our own paths. We all have our own things that we have to learn, and things always, always, always do get better. It's just understanding that what you're going through is a process, and just never, ever, ever give up, but keep on going. So that's
100%.
from me. I'd love to have your last words, Jordan.
My last words are to essentially listen to what you just said. Is there is a 3-word statement that I learned in the bodybuilding world, which when I look at this whole mise en place situation that I've now adapted to mental health, is this: trust the process. It is a process. You do have the ability. You are probably more supported, more loved, more cared for than you know. And you aren't as worthless as you think you are. And the addiction doesn't make you any less worthy than somebody who says they don't have an addiction. It's the way that you approach it that defines you. It's not what you are. It's how it's. I have a saying that I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. And I think that is a very, very powerful statement. And I think that what is happening to me when I was taking drugs and I was addicted, and I am an addict, I chose that, but I don't have to be that. I can become something different. We all can. So, there are resources out there. Speak to people and don't be ashamed. Tell someone. And I promise, the minute you say those words, I take a lot of cocaine and I don't know why. Try that statement. If you are listening to this and you have an addiction, cocaine, marijuana, LSD, whatever you are doing, cigarettes, any of that, strike up a conversation with a stranger and say, I started smoking 10 years ago and I don't know why I did it. I'd like to stop, but I don't know how. Just say it. Just a stranger or a friend or family member. If you're taking cocaine, it's no different to saying to somebody, I've just taken 5 grams of cocaine over the weekend and I have no idea why. I don't think I want to do it again, but I know I'm going to. Say those words. I promise you, it feels like a weight is lifted off of your body, and it gives you a mental clarity and a confidence, because I promise you the person's reaction will not be what you're expecting.
That's strong. Very strong. Thank you so much for being so open and sharing your story with me today.
Not at all. I really
appreciate it. Thank you so much, Jordan. Take care.
You are more than welcome. Take care and stay safe.